Not a very pleasant thing to read, is it really? It's all going to come to an end. It's going to be like overripe fruit. It's not going to taste very good. Ouch. It's like Amaziah, the Israelite priest, has been challenging Amos in chapter 7. Amos is from the south. He's a prophet in the north. You've mostly touched on that. And as if he's now coming to the temple, not at Jerusalem, but at Bethel, where the people have come on pilgrimage, and he's speaking to them and saying the time is ripe for the end. This is what's going to happen. We saw it in verses 1 to 3. He sees this vision. The interesting thing is there's a play on words here in the Hebrew between the word for fruit and the word for end. Please, change. There we go. There's this sense that they're very similar words. There's a play on words going on here. And at the temple, the people will see it destroyed. There'll be dead bodies everywhere. It'll be no longer. The songs will turn to wailing, many of the bedies, and there'll be silence. It's an amazing statement of judgment on these people and what they're going through. Why? Maybe there's some questions they might ask. The first question might be, why are we being judged? Can I change this? Here we go. And again, why are we being judged? What have we done to bring that in? Well, it makes it at verse 4, you are trampling on the needy. In fact, in verse 5 to 6, it makes it even clearer. He talks about the fact that they want to just really make more money. They want to sell more grain. That's the heart of it. All this religious stuff we go through, we want it to be over very quickly. When's the Sabbath going to be over? When's the festival finished so we can go back and sell some more grain? In fact, it's not just about selling grain. They're sort of watching their watches saying, when are we going to finish? We've got something better to do about me and my needs. Because they're very forgetful of the needs of others, particularly the poor. What does it say? Skimping on the measure, boosting the price, cheating with dishonest scales. I keep pointing in the wrong place. These are images that is used a lot in the Old Testament. Even it says, what does it talk about? Selling the wheat on the ground. That was known to be left for the poor. What they would do is they would take every bit they could, even the sweepings of the wheat. They would cheat the poor so they could make more money. Every time we want to make sure we get every last skerrick of our dollar, pay as least amount of tax as possible, argue every cent in that wrong thing in the shop. I just remember this stuff out of Amos chapter 8. When will worship be over? I've got much more important things to do. The second question might be, well, who's going to judge us now? Who has the right to judge us? Well, it's very clear, God has. Verses 4 to 7 talks about the Lord himself has sworn by the pride of Jacob. He's sworn by himself and he can't not do it from himself. I'll never forget anything they've done. Their dark hearts, their selfishness, it will come like an earthquake. In fact, chapter 1 talks about an earthquake that would come. And the Nile was known to flood up and then go back every 12 months. It was a known thing in the ancient Near East, and that's the image God is using. You will be smashed. Everything will fall to the floor. It was a precursor of so much more. As you read in verses 9 to 10, in that day I'll make the sun go down at noon. At the height of the day it will all go dark. And this even reflects what was going on in the people of Israel at that time, these 10 northern tribes under Jeroboam II, which was the high point in their history. They were like the best they'd ever been. What does it say in 1 Corinthians? Pride comes before a fall. That's the point here. At the time of noon, I'm going to make you wear sackcloth and ashes. I'm going to make you like mourning. It'll be like mourning for an only son, the end of like a bitter day. Complete opposite of what their current experience was. You can imagine how this news would even leave a further question. Well, this is going to happen. Who in the world is going to help us? The answer is no one. You'll cry out for help and you'll hear nothing. There'll be a famine, but not just of food and water, but of the word of the Lord. It's like they're crying, God, please help us, show us what to do. And God has gone zip. I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm reminded of Jesus' words in Matthew 4:4, where he says to the devil in the midst of the temptation, said, change these stones into bread. And Jesus says, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. That's what they were missing. They were not going to hear from God. It's a horrible experience, the silence. What else would they turn to? Well, verse 13 tells us that they'll turn to their own gods, the gods of Samaria, of Dan and Beersheba. Will they be able to help? No, they will fall, never to rise again. The people would be left alone in the midst of all their religiosity, in the midst of all the money they thought would help them. None of it would help. One of the richest men in the world back in the early 1920s was J.D. Rockefeller. He was mostly as rich as any of the richest men are now today. Someone asked him when he died in the mid-1930s, how much did Rockefeller take with him? Or how much did he have? He didn't take anything with him, he left it all behind. Didn't actually help him at all. I'm reminded of the words in this song from Simon and Garfunkel in the 1960s. Oh, I've gone back, the song The Sound of Silence. Listen to its last verse. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls, in the tenement halls, and whispered in the sound of silence. God has spoken, but there would be a moment when he would stop, when the fruit is ripe and the time will come. So there's one more step, one more question you might ask. Here we are living, 2,800 years later? How do you apply this today? How does this sort of passage speak particularly to Christian people today? What do we do with that? Now, one question might be, how are you engaging with God's priority for the poor? Not trying to twist them, not trying to make everything you can out of them, but how are you responding to people that are in great need? It can be an individual question, it can be a church question. At Crosslife, we try and best to do it. We have things through our social welfare arm called Compassion Connection, through whom we do food pantries for people at 2 of our campuses. The third one actually has a relationship with another church to do that. Our childcare centres actually make a thing of helping people who can't afford to do childcare sometimes. Part of our budget is set aside to help people. Crossroads is a ministry to the disabled community at our Helensvale campus. We are particularly looking out for how we can engage with those that are in the minority, those who are on the outside, and there are many, many more of many, many types. It's a question for each of us individually as well. How is our life making a difference to the poor? That's part of why God blesses us. But there's another question I want to ask as well, which is how can God judge his people? How do we take messages of God's judgment as Christian people today? How can a covenant-keeping God who wants to bless his people, give them a land and a people and stand with them through thick and thin, come to nothing? Is he committed to them or not? Maybe it's a question, really it's a question we should ask the people of Israel. They're the ones who've fallen on the covenant. Are they committed or not? But when you bring that message into today, we know that through Jesus' death and resurrection, when he died on the cross for our sin and to bring us life now and forever, both life lived now best under his rule and also into the future, with him alongside saying, I will give you rest, I will give you peace if you come to me with your... If our life can be centered on Jesus, we know where he has taken our judgment from God. He's taken our place. What do we do with this? We say this doesn't really matter to us at all. Well, if we're going to look at these messages of the Old Testament through the New Testament eyes, maybe there's a few points we've got to remember. Firstly, it's got to be through the life of the gospel. The gospel isn't set aside from this, nor does the gospel set aside this message. We must see through the death and resurrection of Jesus. Secondly, we must reflect the truth that's in this passage. It's all God's word, Old Testament and New Testament. God is judging here, bringing his condemnation to a people who have rejected him as king, seen in their abusing of the poor and their empty religion. Thirdly, we must not lessen either of these in applying this today, which can leave us a bit confused. I'm not under God's judgment anymore, yet I've got to uphold this can speak to God's people. What do we do with that? Well, the fourth point might help us. Applying this today must reflect the broader New Testament teaching than just like 1 Corinthians 15 of Jesus' death and resurrection. In fact, the gospel through the book of Matthew and the other gospels is an astounding statement of those who are marginalised. And we see this particularly in the Sermon on the Mount. Their empty, religious, godless behaviour of God's people didn't end with the 10 tribes in the north or the 2 tribes in the south and Judah 200 years later. Or with the time of Jesus with the Pharisees, it's continued right through history. There's been people that have done the Amos 8 heartless, godless religion. And that's the people that we must listen to. who must listen to this teaching in Amos 8. Because Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 7, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who's in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Going through the motions, saying the right things, doing it, all those stuff for the wrong reasons. Those sort of people are not forgiven. They're not saved. If you think being in church and doing the amazing things at church is sufficient, that'll get you in. No, it's not. Why is this teaching still here now? Is it still relevant for the church? At times it is, yes. What's the heart of the problem? Well, Jesus goes on in the Sermon on the Mount saying this in chapter 7. Therefore, there's the link, because I'm going to say I didn't know you to some people who seem to be doing all the right thing. Therefore, the application is everyone who's hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like the wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose up, and the winds blew against it, and yet it did not fall because its foundation was on the rock. The other man built it on the sand. It's like a foolish man. The rain came down, the streams rose up, the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell down with a great crash. You must have learned that in Sunday school. Who was in Sunday school years ago learning that stuff? Isn't there like a kid's song about that? Is it so true that powerful truths are wonderfully simply put? Just like this one. The difference is the foundation of the behaviour. Jesus says, hear my words, put them into practice, and you're bound at will. So we might easily say, we just got to be obedient. Just do what Jesus says. See, Jesus even says it here. Yeah, that's right, but it's obedience to what? It's obedience from where? Some people will turn up at judgment and say, didn't I do everything you told me, Lord? I preached a great message. I spoke the prophecy. I did amazing things. I did it all just like you told us to do. And he'll turn to them and say, depart from me, I never knew you. So it's not just the sort of obedience-based do the right thing. No, there's something far deeper than that in this message from Jesus. It's the obedience of the Beatitudes of Matthew chapter 5. Mercy, meekness, trust, commitment, peacemaking, commitment to people above yourself. And all these things presume a relationship with our Creator that is not present in those that do all the things for their own reasons. What does Jesus say to those who are condemned to the judgment when they don't know him? I never knew you. The foundation of the parable of building on the rock is Jesus Christ and knowing him and following after him, having life now and forever in him. So he's taken these steps through Amos 8 and brings us to this point of challenge. You've got to build on the right one. Are you wise? Are you foolish? Are you being real with God, or are you going through the motions? Do you know him, or are you doing things because you've been here over all these many years, always being in a church every Sunday, doing the Christian thing? It's just what you've got to do. It looks right. Well, if you are, be very careful. You could be building on the sand, not building on the rock, which is the Lord Jesus. And the challenge of Amos 8 speaks to you and speaks to me when I find myself in that space at times. Why would that be the case? I'm doing the right thing, God, because God is challenging our positions of power and comfort. That's what the people of Amos 8 were about. You see, when the church is in a place of power and influence in the culture, such that going to church is what everyone does, it's not coming out of a heart and a faith and a belief in Jesus above all else. Well, Amos 8 speaks to a church in that place. It says, be very, very, very careful. Because you are on the brisk, potentially, of forgetting who I am and doing what it is. And yet sometimes in the West, we cry out for the church to be in the centre of society. We cry out what's called Christendom to come back. We bewail the fact that the church is no longer as influential as it used to be. Well, let me remind you, you know where the church is growing the most? China, where it's not the right thing to go to church on a Sunday. Eritrea, similarly. Laos, Vietnam, places around the Middle East. The church thrives. Faith is real because the church is not at the centre of attention, because it's not in that comfortable place where everyone has to listen, where it's actually the right thing to do to follow Jesus, culturally speaking. Be very careful, if I can say this, I think from Amos 8, when we try and make Australia into a Christian nation. Should it be led Christianly? Absolutely. Are we blessed when we have Christian leaders? Yes. Should Christians be involved in politics? Yes. Should Australia become a Christian nation? I'm not so sure. I think God says, I don't want you to be a Christian nation. I want you to be a nation of Christians. I want you people that are committed to me first and follow after me. Maybe the collapse of things of faith in the last couple of years, both inside and outside the church, is the Holy Spirit doing a work on the church in Australia and the West to get us back to our faith-filled, Jesus-centred roots and to avoid becoming like the people in Amos chapter 8. The real question is, out of Amos 8, do you know Jesus? Do you rest your life on him? Do you come to him when you're burdened and weary? Because he says, I'll give you rest. Or do you go to the next self-help thing, even Christian self-help thing that is ahead of him? Both the Old Testament and the New Testament would call that idolatry. If you're on the mountaintop having a fantastic experience, are you still rooted relationally in Jesus? If you're at the low point and things are falling apart, do you come back to that same place of rest in front of Jesus Christ? That is what Amos chapter 8 calls us to do. Not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will be accepted on that day, because not everyone who does that, or even says that, knows him. One of my favourite stories about the 23rd Psalm, we finished with this, concerns a time when a group of people gathered together at an event, closing with some worship, and the leader asked if anyone would like to come and stand at the front and recite Psalm 23 to the group. And a man in his mid-30s, young, handsome bloke, tall, booming bass voice, got up, walked to the front as he put his hand up, and stood up without a Bible being open and recited the psalm flawlessly. It was an amazing reading or recitation of the psalm. And everyone just stood and applauded. What a brilliant presentation of Psalm 23 it was. He sat back down. The leader then asked if anyone else would like to recite the psalm, and another hand went up at the back. It was a much older woman, frail, struggling as she walked up, and everyone watched she walk from the back to the front, coming to the front, and she stood in front of them all, made her way to the microphone. The voice was crackly as she started to bring the psalm, but she too recited it before the group, and when she finished, a dramatic silence came across the whole group. No one spoke, no one applauded, no one said a word. And after a few moments, the man stood up. He said, I noticed something here. When I quoted the psalm, you all stood and applauded. But when this woman quoted the psalm, you all sat in silence. No one applauded. Why is that? I think I know the difference. This man or woman knew the shepherd. I just knew the psalm. Do you know the shepherd? Do you walk with the shepherd? Is the defining mark of your life that the life of Jesus is lived through you? As Galatians 2 verse 20 says, it's no longer I that live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave his life for me. That exchanged life, that transformed Jesus-centered life is the heart of life this side of the grave and the other side of the grave. And Amos chapter 8 warns religious people who want to get religion out of the way quickly so I can go and make more money or look after myself as number one, ignoring the poor and using them to my own benefit, and all those things, that heartless religion, that use of the poor, they go together. And Jesus deconstructs it all, fulfilling Amos 8, to say there's a way you can avoid the day that will come like the overripe fruit if you know the King.